Okay, I would like to start our Board of Education meeting on February 23rd, 2022. To start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is to approval of the agenda. So I have a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Rebecca and seconded by Lindsay. All in favor? Aye. Item number 3 is public comment. At the beginning of the meeting, public comment should refer to items that are on the agenda. We are going to ask that, because there are a number of people here, we'd like to hear everyone's comments, everyone's thoughts, ideas, suggestions. And in order to do that, we do have to have some limits. So we're going to be asking that you keep your comments between 3 minutes. And Lindsay's gonna let you know when you have a minute or 30 seconds. She'll give you a little time card, she'll hold it up. And we would ask you to please abide by that so that others can have an opportunity to speak. Do we have anyone from the community that would like to speak? Yes. If you can come up to the mic, please. Make sure you state your name and your town, please.
Carl, excuse me, Durham. Once again, I notice the meeting is on YouTube. No public comment from the community. I hear it's been looked into and can't do it, won't happen. Well, it can happen if you want it to happen. Other organizations are able to do it. And I kind of take it as a little bit of a slap in the face of the community because they can watch it, sit there, listen, watch it, but be quiet. So I think we need to really look into getting public comment. The government does it. I've listened to conferences, doctor's office do it. You have face-to-face and comment. We really need to look at it some more. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we're going to go on to item number 4. Our next board meeting is on March 9th at 7 p.m. Item number 5, we have a committee report from the policy committee meeting.
Sure, thank you, Lucy. The policy committee met last week. We had basically 3 things. We talked about, for a lot of the new members, how policy is generated and where it comes from and how it's maintained. We also talked about what Carl was talking about is that we would ask our IT department to investigate options for providing live public access and public comment. He's working on that and will get us a report very shortly.
Okay.
He had some meetings already and had one proposal, but he was gathering some more information on that. So he said he would get to us as soon as he could. And the third was under item 11 on public comment, we discussed about comments will be received after being included in the minutes, and recommended that not be part of our comment because we get lots of comments, and we also, some of them are related to Board of Ed business, and we thought we should leave it as eliminate that sentence from the agenda and indicate if people want to have their comments included in the agenda they ask for it. So it's not automatically every comment, written comment goes into the agenda, because as you know, we get lots of written comments.
And I believe that was instituted when COVID was at its peak and we were having
Everything was under
just Zoom meetings. And so therefore, the public did not have an opportunity to come forward
in many cases,
and speak. Yeah. And I'm not even sure if we included a lot of emails at that time anyway, so.
I included the ones that asked that be included.
Just those that asked to be included? Right. Okay. And also there is another avenue, besides this being televised and people being able to come in person emails. You can always email either before or after our board meeting if you have an opportunity not to watch the meeting live, but to watch the YouTube later. You can certainly email, and those are all, they're answered somehow, they're passed along to where they need to go, and then they're referenced at our next meeting.
I think that's an important point too, Lucy, because just having done this with a number of boards, one of the things that can happen if you're, well, first of all, streaming is different than an interactive meeting. So if you're trying to provide comment while you're streaming, when you're streaming to provide access so people can see what you're doing without actually having to be there. During COVID, different situation, but under regular circumstances, a lot of boards do stream, and that's great. What we've seen, what can happen, if you have comments, you can imagine coming in throughout that time in the meeting, that instead of getting business done, you spend an exponential amount of time taking comments at the time that you're sitting at the meeting. That's not to discourage doing that. I've done that aspect as well, but I think it's really important to focus on the fact that you do respond and circulate the emails to all of us, so we do get everyone's comments either here. I'm not sure if people really know that, but we do get them, and some of them are very involved, and we read them all.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it.
Does anyone else have any comments about the removing that section at the bottom, the comments received will be included in the minutes? Anyone else have any other thoughts on that? Okay. Item number 6 is communications, and as Rebecca was saying, for the most part, if I receive an email and it is just sent to me or even to one other person, most of those emails, when I respond, are forwarded to the rest of the board members, because most of the time the information in those emails is something that the entire board should be aware of as well, and then I'll respond individually. So the emails don't just go to one person, they do get sent to the board for the most part. As far as communications, I received an email which was forwarded to me from Lindsay from an EMTJJ, which had no name, so I'm not exactly sure who it is, regarding the budget, the field house, robotics, and high school enrollment decline, and the possibility of an 8th grade survey about high school attendance after 8th grade. I forwarded this email to the board and I responded. I received an email from Melinda Lauderdale regarding support for keeping masking in schools. I forwarded her email to the board and I responded. She has since sent another email that I have not yet responded to. I just received it today. I received an email from Debbie Lauschneider dated February 10th regarding the district purchasing high visibility reflective vests for athletes. I forwarded this email to the board, the superintendent, to Kim Newbig, our business manager, and to Todd Petronio, our athletic director, and I responded. I also received an email that was forwarded to me from Amanda from Shannon McDuff, dated February 15th, regarding mask policy and changes to mask choice. I believe that the superintendent responded to that email. I have received an email from Ken Margolfo from WTNH, WCTX, dated February 16th, questioning the district's plans for masks. The superintendent responded to that one. That was not forwarded to the entire board. An email from Nicole Zappone from the Record Journal, dated February 21st, regarding upcoming meeting location and COVID policy updates, and I responded to her. I received several emails from Michelle DeMauro expressing support for the budgeted field house and including a detailed history of the project. The email was sent to the board members and I responded. I received an email from Nicole Ercolani dated February 10th regarding public comment at the previous board meeting, and I responded to that. I believe all the board members received that as well. I received an email from Samantha Winkler, MTA project program coordinator, sharing the happenings at the MTA. I forwarded this email to the board and I responded. And the last one, I received an email from Michael Doyle sharing concerns about public comment issues and any program book objections, which I responded to. Did anyone else receive any other communication?
We received
Yes,
a few
Jay.
today.
I'm sorry.
Today we did.
Pardon? Oh,
we
today,
got
yeah,
some
I have received emails today that I have not responded to. They're not on the list yet. Jamie?
I spoke at length with Middlefield resident Michael Janis, who happens to be an HVAC professional, but he was questioning, after the referendum failed, sort of our estimates for the John Lyman renovations and the different phases and so on. I gave him as much information as I could from my own perspective, not as the board. But also justification for, why are we doing this at Lyman? Well, if we're gonna keep it open, we need to fix it. That's it, so. Mike Janis from Middlefield.
Anyone else? Great. Item number 7, our next fiscal year 2022-2023 budget discussion.
Thank you. If I could kick things off and then kind of go where the board wants to go, and Kim will have most of the detail here. If you recall, it was just 2 weeks ago we presented the budget, so I know it's still fresh in your mind, but I know a number of you have reached out to one or more of us, primarily Kim, for information. And there's also a Google Doc that Kim created and that many of you have popped questions into. So if it's okay, we thought we would start by letting Kim kind of go through what came through the Google Doc over the last couple weeks and her responses to that. Then we had 3 items listed to go a little bit more in depth on based on some requests that we had. One is health insurance, the other 2 relate to capital maintenance, one specifically to the stadium project, AKA the field house, whatever you want to call it. We're not trying to disguise it. That topic has got a lot of attention. And then also the 2% capital reserve. So those are the things that we had teed up for tonight, but certainly we can talk about any of them. And then I guess when we're done with those, depending on where we are with time and everything, it would also be helpful for us to know, are there other topics that we didn't get to tonight or that didn't get dropped into the Google Doc that you would want us to address tonight or to come back with information on 2 weeks from tonight for our next meeting on March 9th? Does that sound like a good way to proceed?
Perfect.
All right, so Kim, if you would start with the Google Doc.
Sure. So on the Google Doc, I received three questions. 2 actually were about kind of the same thing. Bob Moore and Lucy Petrella asked, should we consider bonding of the Picket Lane pavement and use capital reserve for some short-term repairs? Lucy also stated she would also like to be noted as considering bonding for Picket Lane. And the question was, if we bond, where does the money go under? And can we just transfer that line if the bonding referendum fails to the improvements? So here's my candid answer. It's certainly an option to bond. However, the caution I use is if the bonding referendum should fail. Now, that's always going to be a concern, but should we have a bond issue that fails, will push us back 2 years in our paving cycle, should we have to save for it under capital reserve. Now, to Lucy's point, well, if you're going to be putting money in for a bond payment, can't you just reallocate that to the improvements? You can, but that'll be about $100,000 to $150,000 is all you really put for a bond payment. And what I'm looking for this time around is $582,000. So it's not going to be enough. Even with the $582,500 that I'm proposing to put into capital reserve this year, I'm going to need another $700,000 next year to finish this project. So if we bond now and it fails, now we're going to have to make up this 582, this opportunity that we're missing. Now we're going to be into the 24-25 year. And the road is not going to make it to 24-25. We spend about $5,000 to $10,000 a year, which is it's a lot of money, but relative when you think about it, about $5,000 to $10,000 a year fixing the potholes on Picket Lane, which are short-term fixes because we're fixing them again in a couple months. But lately we've been noticing a crumbling, a deterioration where you're almost down to dirt. So now the section needs to be cut out, and that's $10,000 on its own, each section, and more sections are deteriorating. So I just fear especially with, we just, asked for the bond referendum for Lyman. I don't want to have to keep going back to the people and asking for bond referendums. You know, even if we it's not even always the wise decision to bond for $1 or $2 million, because, you know, then that takes care of one need, and we're gonna have end-of-life systems that keep coming up, and then we're gonna go back again the next year and ask for more bonding money. So it's not my choice, but I just wanted to let you know that could you do it? Sure, but I don't know what's gonna happen to the road in that extra year, but also in addition to that, you're gonna be putting a lot more money into repairs over the next 2 years. That would reduce the budget by, if you took out just the paving, it's a 582, which is maybe about 1.25% to 1.5% of the budget. It would reduce it. I'm gonna stick maybe closer to 1.25%, because then if you have to put in a bonding interest amount, you know, that would increase it. So that's my thought on that. And then, the last.
I guess I was under the impression you said that the estimated cost was 1.7 million.
Correct.
And under our scenario, it would take us 3.5 years to put aside $1.7 million, and so you wouldn't start until that.
So under our 6.9 million, we have money in there that is for a little bit of paving, and then we have contingency, and we also have funds that we're saving for the Pickett Lane culvert because we
Yeah.
got the grant. So the idea is to use those funds, which are all under that umbrella.
And how much is that, you know?
Could be about $400,000.
So we would need 2 years of funding at least.
Which is what I said, yep,
Yeah.
this year. But if we fund 23, 24, and it gets approved in May, we can start the work right away. We plan to do the 23 summer, so we can still do the work as soon as the kids get out, as soon as the budget is passed. So that timeline will work. If we delay that, then we won't work.
If we did bond it, we wouldn't, the bond payment wouldn't hit until the 22, 23
It's
year.
a year out, yeah.
As well, so you have more impact on this year's budget, capital-wise.
You do.
If you did that.
You would reduce this year's budget, no doubt about it, but
And you could put
not a scenario I
some money
think
in
is
for
worthwhile.
other capital repairs throughout the district.
What does it reduce us to if we did?
So depending on how much you took out, 1% is 380,000. So if you're gonna take out 582, which is what I.
Okay, that's where you get that
earmarked.
582?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just, it just seems to me, I didn't know that you were thinking about reallocating the money under the current bond issue and how much we had there.
Mhm.
And
We
some
can
of
do
that-
it in the 2 years if we save this money.
Okay.
But that's also, to your point, Bob, that's not saving for anything else,
Right.
really. There's a couple things in this year why it's only 582. But then next year, it would need to be the full 2% again, the
Yeah.
700,000.
So you'd be using all of
Just
it
a
next
couple.
year
Yes, we would.
for roads.
Yes, we would. Yep.
So I think really it matters whether or not it's a risk to go to referendum or not. I mean, budget-wise, it has an impact, a positive impact probably, but it allows you to do other things with the capital reserve.
Yep.
But really, the issue is really gonna be, is there a risk to go to a referendum on the budget and the bonding referendum at the same night?
Well, that's the problem, is it is a risk.
Yeah,
What
it's-
what happens if in May we don't
Well, it's
we
also
don't
a
have the
risk
money
that
at
the
all?
budget doesn't
Right.
get adopted, so, I mean, there's two
Can we lay
risks.
out these scenarios maybe sort of side by side, so we look at timeline and
Yeah.
we look at what that looks like? Because I'm not as good as some of you at keeping all of these in my head, but I think it's worth discussing what they look like side by side.
So the option of bonding for the funds, if you were to bond, we would remove the 582, or maybe even more, should the board want to remove more out of that, which would reduce the current operating budget proposal,
Right,
could be by up to 2%.
sure.
However, if you wanted to just reallocate those funds for other capital projects, it's not going to reduce the operating budget at all.
Right,
Like,
so
that
I'm
can
just,
stay the same.
got it. So, and I got where you're coming from. I just meant, I think,
Timeline
some
for
healthy
construction.
discussion about, right, just looking at the timelines. I'm not advocating for it.
Yep,
I
nope,
think what
and
you've
I'm just
laid
trying to
out is
explain.
really excellent. But I just think it's worth us kind of looking at all of those things, because people are also gonna ask us if we considered those things, and we should
Yep,
consider
yep.
them.
So we can, if we save the money this time and another 700,000 next budget cycle, and use the money in the contingency and from the culvert, we can pave Picket Lane in the summer of '23. Should we not put it in this budget and go to referendum, there's district meetings,
Yep.
there's 30-day notice, and that brings us out some time, and then if it fails,
Right.
we've missed the opportunity to put it in this budget cycle.
Don't want you to think I'm
we should do
arguing
that.
with you. I think what you know, there are a lot of reasons to have it put forward the way it is, that it's in the proposed budget. I just thought I wanted to, I'll sit down and put that together then, so I
What are our
can see it
costs?
side by side.
What are our costs with budget, with bonding?
So,
Between the polls and
so
the
when
workers
you,
and the
when
bonding?
we run a referendum, it could cost in the neighborhood of $13,000 for a referendum. But then also, each time you issue bonds, the financing fees, the attorneys, the financial advisors, about $45,000. So typically, when you bond, you don't want to bond for 1 or 2 million, you want to bond for 10 or whatever, because you're still paying the $45,000. You go back to bond every year, that's $45,000 you're paying every year, because it's all starts over again.
So as much as it reduces our budget and looks okay, we're adding 45,000 to the taxpayers. Well, 55, 58,
Yeah.
okay.
I do want to mention, while you're talking about Picket Lane, I thought about, even though I had mentioned about bonding, I had thought about, you know, the actual percentage of increase and some ways that we could possibly cut into the budget. So I have several suggestions, and one of which would be to completely take Picket Lane out of the budget. But I will bring this up later, and we could discuss it. Because, and especially with you saying it's a 1.25% saving, that's significant. So at least for this year, you know.
It's
that
a
was
savings,
one
but
of the
that
thoughts.
brings up what I'm saying, we're adding 58,000 to the taxpayers if we go to bond.
To the project.
Well, I'm not saying go to bond, I'm just saying take it out completely and bring it up again next year, as one of my
I don't know that that's,
suggestions
We
for
can't
cost
wait for
savings.
Picket,
right.
The
And-
Picket Lane is crumbling. I mean, can we do it? We can do it with repairs consistently, but you're gonna be up in the hundreds of $1,000s of just of repairs if we wait another year.
Which part of the road is worse? Is it the smaller piece?
Every
The
inch.
culvert was all?
Allenbrook Culver or?
No, the
It's right in front, I
culvert
think
here.
it's right around in front of the high school is really bad.
Front of the high school's
Like
the
that
worst.
whole straight and then on that curve. It's just, it's disintegrating.
It's really the start of the tennis courts all the way up and around. It's like you're playing.
Well, unfortunately, as much as it needs to be done, if the budget doesn't pass, it's not gonna happen.
Yep, but with
So-
all due respect, we have, since I've been here, that's kind of been the thought is that we'll take it out for this year to get this year passed, and then next year we have the same issue, only it's bigger because we're later into it. So I just would, my thought on it, and the board can do what they want, but my thought is, it's time, and I also think when these things are coming up, like the COVID grant we got that covered our chiller, I thought, oh, we got a lucky pass again. Now we're allowed to save 2% for capital. Oh gosh, the district got another lucky pass. Because without those, we just couldn't do it. So I think it's a blessing that we can put it in this budget and accomplish it in 2 years, personally.
Well, and I was gonna say, even if we chose to go out to bond, I still want you to save the 2%.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
we're in a
thank you.
pickle right now, because just like you said, every year, when something needs to be saved, it always comes out of capital. Always. And it's just not, it's not being fiscally responsible, even though we're spending money, but then we're struggling. And then I just wanted to just say, because there are a lot of people here and because there are a lot of new people on the board, it's just that we can't do it, we wouldn't even be able to pave it this year, even if we had the money, because we're doing the culvert this summer.
Right.
And then also, somebody's paying for the beginning of the paving over by Strong School, I don't
Because of
remember
the
who that
water
was.
project,
Yes.
yes.
So,
Thank you
I
for
just
saying
wanted to say
that,
that.
too, because there are projects that we had to take priority shift away from this year to be able to cover this, and one of them being the sprinkler. system, the pump house, that we just can't get people to go in. It's in a dungeon, it's not safe. We need to bring it above ground, but we don't have the money, we can't save for that. We also have some ADA improvements that we have to make that Jen can shake her head, that we've been putting off for years, taking it out. And so now, my thought is, well, I'm gonna have to budget for that under the operating budget because I just can't get it into the capital. So by not taking it out just to reduce the operating budget is not doing anybody any favors.
Jen, are those ADA compliant? Those are all different schools, right?
It's
Every
actually
school's
just
got a-
Coggin and the auditorium. We had an ADA audit a couple years ago, and these are things that they flagged us on. And each year we have to report progress that's been made on it, and we need to make some better progress on it, for sure.
And there's no grants available for that?
Yeah. I'll move on to, what the last question was from Lucy: have we received any updated figures from the building committee for the field house? I have not. Bob reached out to me today and thought that maybe Darren had some new numbers, but I didn't get any information. Last I heard was the company that initially quoted the project no longer does business in Connecticut,
Right.
but there is a company in Rockfall that does. And so, but I haven't seen a quote. I actually think the 180 that we put in there may not even be enough, but it was what we had used last year before it was taken out, the 150 for the building and then the 30 for a knee wall. So.
Does somebody want to reach out to Darren?
Yeah, I did. And he was gonna call Kim.
Okay.
Okay.
I think he was at work today.
Okay, so then I'll move on to the 3 items that Doug had mentioned that we'll focus on tonight, and then, like you said, if there's the other areas, we can go into it another meeting. Just let me know what areas we want to focus on, and then, of course, if there's any questions, to put it in the Google Doc. That works really well, because it gives me a chance to get perfect information and not try to rely on my memory all the time. So health insurance, nothing has changed since the last meeting. I talked to our broker today who said everything is status quo. Connecticut will not back off our 22% rate because we're still at the 131% loss ratio. We actually had one high user come off the plan but was replaced with another high user, so we're still status quo. They also reached out to other several carriers in the area who said they won't even quote us, that we're just too high. They're not gonna get involved. We do have the 2 options which are actually incorporated into this budget. And one was to go to the state partnership plan, and the other is to join a consortium of other school districts. With that, depending on, and we won't know the rates until around April for the state partnership plan, and maybe around April for the consortium. So did the best we could estimating what it would be. But if we were to switch to one of those plans, I'm hoping and I'm kind of thinking that it'd be around $700,000 of a savings, or roughly 2% on our budget. Now let me reiterate, I've already incorporated that in there. It's not gonna reduce the budget 2%. Should that not work out and we have to stay with Connecticut, that 456 is now a 656. So, but I'm optimistic it's gonna work out with one of the 2 plans. We're cognizant that we have the 6 unions and we've got a process to file with the unions. So, we've got different clauses in each union contract. So, that'll be something that we will pursue with the unions and present the plan and get everybody, they have the opportunity to review it and to, object to it, and then we can go to arbitration and mediation if we need to. And capital reserve was the $740,000, which is 2%. The items that I earmarked it for this year was the turf replacement, the continuation of funding of 27.5. Now I know people have talked about that. Why do we need to replace? Why do we need to put that money in the turf? Well, that's the one thing that the district should be proud of. Not the one thing, but a very thing that they should be proud of is that we have committed to this turf funding every single year of saving. And now when we need to have the turf redone in a year or 2, and we may get 2 more years out of it, we have the money. We're gonna do it when it's time to do it. If we start taking away from that, we're gonna be in the same situation where we're gonna say, well, now we don't have enough money to do the turf. So that, I thought was important to close that loop, and make that the last savings amount. We budget every year, for unanticipated repairs and maintenance of $50,000, and that's obvious. We have things that break, and there's plumbing, there's sewer, there's fire alarm panels, there's stuff every day, roofs, that we use that $50,000 for. So that I would not want to take away. We also have brick replacement and repair at Strong. So Strong has, and I have a write-up that Jimmy had given me, but it's a repair, it's the original brick from 1956. And he thinks it was repointed in about 2003. But rain is getting in, and it's seeping in, and it's leaking into the building. So it needs to be repointed, and that's about $80,000. And then the Picket Lane paving at the 1.7 million. Like I said earlier, it's kind of been a shift in the priorities, because last year I was saying we need to save for this pump house and we need to get the ADA repairs, which we have funded 50%. So, you know, we're moving in the ADAs. But now I'm saying we have to do Picket Lane. And I said why the bonding, and then the field house, that increased the budget about 0.46% for the $180,000. And again, that was a figure from last year. And I told you that the vendor no longer works in Connecticut. I just did want to note that the cost of the slab that's out there now this is just a slab. I know in the email from one of the taxpayers it said, you know, the price of the project, and that's not inaccurate. But just the slab cost the district $170,000. Today's dollars, that's about $250,000. So to destroy the slab would be destroying that money that's come so far. So I just thought that was an important piece to put out there about that's what we've spent so far on that.
What about all the plumbing underneath it?
Oh yeah, the plumbing is not included in this. That's probably closer to a $300,000 number.
Total or just for the plumbing?
Total.
Total.
Going back to the brick at Strong School, is that something that needs to get fixed, like, immediately?
Yeah, should be, yes. I had asked Jimmy, I had asked Jimmy, give me your priorities. And he said that's gotta be addressed.
Right.
So, you know.
Like, do we have money from this year, or are we dipping into reserve, or?
Well, most likely we'll not have money, this $80,000
Right.
this year to spend on it.
Right, but I mean, are we fixing it, or is there water in the school with the kids?
Oh, there's water in the school now. I mean, we need the money.
And is there
to repair
mold?
it. I don't know if there's mold.
'Cause that's an issue.
Let me get the write-up he wrote about it. What do I do with it? I'll just read. I probably can't put my finger on it now. Here it is. Okay, so the section was built in 1959. It appears that the brickwork is original. Brickwork around the corner of the south elevation appears to have been repointed probably during the 2003 renovation. The brick wall is leaking into the cafeteria after heavy wind-driven rain. The brick is absorbing moisture and transferring water to the interior wall cavity and is leaking mainly over windows and doors. The recommended remedy is to repoint the entire brick face and apply a masonry sealer. We currently have a proposal of $85,000. We will be obtaining 2 more competitive bids. So it's actively leaking.
Say something, please. Yeah. Just to go back to the health insurance, and just so you know why Kim and I felt confident about budgeting at the savings. We've done a little homework, and our understanding is that at a minimum, we can join the state plan. And so that's where we kind of feel like we may land if this other consortium that may not even take us. We've kind of applied to them, and they kind of compete with each other, and they both seem to have good reputations. So we feel like both of them have the advantage of we become pooled with much larger groups, and we get the advantage of that. I think the other piece that I think Kim mentioned the last time we talked about this is we want to make sure we make the right choice because both of them require a 3-year commitment. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing what we feel is like in the best interest. So more to come on that.
We had looked into the state plan at the last union negotiations and as I remember, their benefits were pretty similar, but that would be the only probably issue that the unions would have in terms of, what's the benefit difference is that they have.
Exactly, and the clause, although it's stated a little bit different, each contract is equal or better, which the plan will be.
Yeah.
But they have the opportunity to vet it and make
How
any
many
kind of
are in the
adjustment.
state plan now? There was probably a few dozen 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and now it's probably quite a bit more than that, I think.
It's pretty popular.
I've only heard favorable things from my colleagues about it and from what they're hearing from their employees, but that doesn't mean that'll be our experience necessarily.
And the exposure there is what happens down the line when the state can't afford to pay for it. But if it's working for you now, we used to give presentations a couple of years ago, we were saying beware, and now it's like, well, if it's working for you right now, you may as well take the shot at it. And it's pretty much like a 1985 PPO plan, so it's a pretty nice plan.
Yeah.
It is. The other piece of it, which some people may like and some people may not like, is to get the what they call their best rates, you have to actively get annual physicals, and there's things you have to do as a subscriber. Again, as a supporter of wellness and well-being, I favor those things, but some people might view that as a hassle, like if they don't want to go to get an annual physical, and it doesn't deny them coverage the way I understand it, it just charges them a higher premium. Because
The emphasis there is on preventive versus,
Absolutely.
saying, okay, something's
Yep.
happened, let's fix it. Yeah.
Yes, and to financially incentivize that, because some people, it's not like they don't want to go, they just don't get around to doing it, but if they know, oh, this is my premium differential, then a lot of people, I think, would be motivated by that.
Is the current Connecticut policy an HMO?
It is a
HSA?
HPA, yep, high
So
deductible.
moving us to a PPO is a benefit for our
Us.
employees.
I
They
think
don't-
it
you don't
is.
have
I
to
would
be-
think so, but we did make the switch to HDHPs just a few years ago, all the bargaining is because the rates were so much cheaper. But now we're not seeing that to be the case, so, that would be another discussion with the union, that it is a little bit different of a plan design, but we think it's a richer plan design, so hopefully that would be amenable to them.
So it's less prior auth, so you basically go where you wanna go in a PPO plan, but it's usually historically higher deductibles, right?
HD in a PPO, higher deductible, they'll have the co-pays and whatnot in a PPO, where the HDHP with the flexible spending, it's out of pocket till you hit your deductible, and then the amount, the insurance kicks in, so it's a lot out of pocket initially.
It's just if you're familiar, it's just a very different plan.
Right.
And I think the other piece that I think you mentioned the last time, which bears repeating, is through our bargaining agreements, the board has also historically put money into the health savings accounts of the employees, which I think is pretty typical. If we switch to a PPO, those health savings accounts kind of go away in terms of being active. People still keep what they've got in them now, but we don't have to make contributions, and a lot of our employees make, elective contributions into those plans, because they have some real tax advantages to them if you're able to afford that. So, again, this would be a very different plan entirely, but again, in my experience, a well-designed PPO plan is a lot more popular with most employees. I'm not saying there aren't some who wouldn't prefer to have what we currently have, but that's what I've heard from my colleagues as well that have switched.
Yeah, the unions statewide have been pushing for move everybody into the state partnership plan that they can, unless when you get your advice from your consultant, it comes back at a much higher price. But even then, people really generally have wanted to get into that plan, which is why I think it's, if it financially makes sense for us, then it's certainly worth looking at.
Yeah.
Do we use Brown & Brown? Who do we use for our
No,
insurance?
Acrisure,
Okay.
We went out to bid a couple years ago, and they came in at early, and they've done great by us. They came in fairly low bid. But with that point, I'm losing, one of the reasons that boards of ed or school districts were shying away from the state plan, to Rebecca's point a few years ago, was, well, when you get those districts in with those high loss ratios, everybody's rates are gonna go up. Guess what? That's us. So we're coming in now, and because we have no other choice.
We're on the good side of
And
it.
that's what we were cautioned about when the plan first started, is, oh, you're gonna get those people with the high loss ratios and your rates are gonna go up. Well, that's us now.
So if the state plan accepts us, then could someone from that, insurance company come and speak to the
Oh, yeah,
unions?
that's required.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just-
yeah. And the state plan accepts everybody.
Ah.
So, but the consortium does not accept everybody, so
Okay.
they would have to, and even if they accepted us, they would adjust our rates based on our loss.
For
And
both or just the consortium?
just the consortium.
For the
State
first
plans
year,
For the first year,
the consortium has a pretty amazing track record over the last few years.
they do.
So it might be the better long-term value, but we would have to weigh that given the increases in the current budget.
And you also don't know if they'll take us.
Correct. But we've submitted and we've
And we
done,
won't
we've
find
had.
out until April.
Is that what they said?
I think they're meeting tomorrow, the
Okay.
Board of Ed, and we might be able to hear sooner, but we won't necessarily know what the rates are until April. And then we have to commit in April to them. There's another deadline, April 25th, I think, is where we have to 100% in. So we have a little bit of time still to decide which way to go.
The other piece that may play into employees' perspective, and I know I've talked to a few of them, is if we go with the state plan, and this may not always be the case because they bid it out, but they're currently running Anthem as their provider, and I've heard a lot of our folks that have had experience with Anthem prefer that to Connecticut. Nothing against Connecticut, but it's just kind of what I've heard, and again, I've heard that in other districts. So again, if we go with the state plan, we may start with Anthem, and then they may bid that out statewide, and we might be with somebody else down the road. So people just need to know that.
I'd like to thank you, Kim and Doug, for doing such a great job putting together the budget. I know every piece that went into the budget was carefully considered, vetted, and chosen, prioritized and chosen. And I appreciate that, and I know we have past experience from other budgets. However, we really need to take a look at this budget, and we need to take a look at the fact that we're looking at a 4.96% increase. And we need to kind of shift our thinking from sitting here as board members and being out there in the public and taking a look at this and what their reaction is gonna be. We need to kind of change hats here a little bit. And I think because of that, I think we seriously need to take a look at what ways can this budget be cut? What ways can we do it that are gonna make the most sense? I suggested, I first thought about bonding the Picket Lane to take it out, and then as I thought about it, I made the suggestion about no improvements to Picket Lane. Doesn't seem like that's going to go over well. But $1.7 million to completely replace that road is an awful lot of money for the district to support. I don't know what the costs are, but has the district, have you considered just pave the road, because if it needs to have some repairs, just for now, just pave it? Do we really need to completely gut it and start all over from new?
We have no base
Can we
left
really
on it,
afford
we
that?
pour down the dirt.
I know that. I'm throwing this out for consideration, we don't have to discuss it right now. I'd also like to take a look at staffing. I know we talked about no staffing cuts, but I think it's something that needs to be looked at, needs to be considered. If not staffing cuts, at a minimum, hiring freezes, meaning that if someone is leaving the school for any reason, a teacher is leaving, that teacher is replaced by someone from within. Another suggestion that I would like to be considered is we have 2 elementary schools that have very small populations. Do we need an administrator in both of those schools? Can those schools share an administrator? Can they share a nurse? Can they share administrative staff? Just some ideas that I'm throwing out, and maybe I'll come up with some other ones later, but just some things to think about, because we can't consider not fixing Picket Lane. We can't take this out, we can't take that out. In the meantime, we're looking at a 4.96% increase that's gonna go to the voters and get voted down, and then you're gonna have to look at the budget, and you're gonna have to find ways to cut it down anyway. Just taking Picket Lane out alone is approximately 1.25%. That knocks that budget down. Okay, I mean, you just need to start thinking outside the box and finding ways, because, you know, you may not wanna cut anything that's here. You may not like the suggestions that I have, come up with some of your own. But the bottom line is that 4.96% is quite an excessive amount. Yes, I know, for the last 5 years, we've had very reasonable budgets, and people have still complained, but this is a lot. I mean, as we get out there and we look at some of the costs of things, and yes, everything does go up, and yes, I understand, and believe me, you have no idea how pro-education I am. But if you want the budget to pass, it's gotta be relatively reasonable. I'm not saying there should be no increase, but, because I think that doesn't make any sense. But I think that the increase needs to be much more reasonable. We may hear more in the future, if we meet with our Board of Finances, which we have done in the past. We've had a joint meeting with the Board of Finances from both Durham and Middlefield. And you know, maybe you don't believe it, especially some of our new members may not understand, but when you start to hear it from other people in the community, you'll understand. So I just wanted to throw that out there before we move on. Any other comments?
I had a couple of questions on some details, and I will put them in the questions for you.
Thank you.
They're just minor questions on numbers and a few couple little errors, it looks like, but nothing significant on that. The other thing I want to say, Lucy, is that, you know, if we look at the inflation over the last 7 years, we've had basically a flat budget for the last 6 years.
Right.
And, you know, not accounting for the inflation that's occurred over the last 6 or 7 years. So that, you know, when you look at the total scheme of things, it's probably not as significant. You know, we're way under what inflation would have done, but we've made lots of cuts over the years. So in terms of a long-term strategy, it's not a huge amount compared to where we were in 2016, 17, or 18. But, you know, a one-shot deal, you know, 4.9% is a big change.
It's a big change, but I feel like we also haven't, as a district, been saving. You know, we have to put money in because we haven't been saving for years. We haven't been putting that percentage back in the capital improvements.
And Lucy, I agree with you. Kim, I agree. I understand the imperative. It's really imperative for Picket Lane. I drive it every morning and afternoon. My car bounces all around. So I know and I agree with you, but I agree with Lucy that I don't know if this is the year. I do believe that we're still up in the air about Lyman, and I'm being optimistic. I'm still foreseeing that maybe there's a little bit of a savings that might happen in the future. I know that's one of the agenda items, so maybe I'm talking ahead of myself to find out what our options are with Lyman, but I'm way ahead. I'm more in favor of saving, but not doing that project right now, as opposed to cutting staff at this moment, because I think that because we are coming out of COVID, just like Doug said, I loved his idea that we are not gonna cut staff right now. I think it's the worst thing we could do to people after what they just put in for the last 2 years. And I really think that the staffing as to where we're gonna finally have staff is really gonna it still has to pan out. And I don't think this is the year to cut staff. I'd rather keep bumping along in my car on the road for another year than to cut staff.
Any other thoughts? Okay, we're gonna be discussing this for
Mhm.
a few meetings, so, you know, we have plenty of time to continue. Okay, we're gonna move on to item number 8, the superintendent's report. First item is an update on the John Lyman Elementary School options.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Maura, for setting me up. Nice transition, nice segue there. So I know a lot of people are very interested in this topic, and again, I don't want to repeat a lot of what I said last time, but just at a very high level, we've tried multiple times through referendum to get permission to close John Lyman, and those efforts have failed. And then most recently, we went out to bond to make what I would characterize as long overdue, depending on your definition of long, but things that probably should have been funded several years ago, but haven't been, and that referendum failed also. And so we talked about a number of options, and I'm not gonna go through all those options again, but we can go back to any of them if you want to revisit. But what I do wanna talk to you about is the one that I feel like has a real possibility to move this situation forward. And so, based on our last meeting and input that we got from some of the folks that advise us, we did reach out to some of our local legislators who represent Middlefield and Durham. And we learned that there is a process by which the State General Assembly could give the board permission to close John Lyman in spite of the way these votes have gone. The way it was described to me is, the technical term is, it's a validating act. And basically, the way the legislation is written, again, I'm still new to Connecticut figuring this out, but they take an action of the Board of Ed and they write the validating act in a way that says, notwithstanding how these referendums went, we empower the board in this specific instance to take this specific action, kind of given there aren't a lot of options here. And so this moves very quickly if we wish to pursue it, because as you may know, the General Assembly is currently in its regular session. And they don't stay in there a very long time. So these things start in committee, and based on our conversation, and Lucy is part of that as well, you know, they've initiated this, but you're not bound to it, because they knew we were going to be talking tonight. And so basically, if you wish to even consider moving forward with this, what we would do is we would draft a resolution for this board to consider at its next meeting on March the 9th. So as this is kind of walking through the State General Assembly, they would ask a commitment from this board in terms of a resolution to close the school. And so you'd be voting on something that you wouldn't even know if you'd be allowed to do. But basically that would show that that is the intent of this board. And even though the board has voted in the past to take those actions, this is a slightly different circumstance, and this is a different board. It's a very different board. And so it's not my part to presume where each of you have sat. I know a number of you have kind of articulated since you've been on the board, or maybe even possibly in other settings, where you kind of sit on this. But what I don't want to do is go through the motions of putting this resolution together for 2 weeks and getting our community, who many of which probably would support this action and many of which would not, and get that kind of conversation going. Probably the fact that I brought this up, it's already going to start, but that's okay. This is a difficult issue where people are on different sides. So if you don't wish us to do that, based on kind of where you sit tonight even, then we would go back to the legislators and ask them to withdraw the work that they've already kind of introduced on this. And they would understand that. Having said all that, the opposite is not true. If you all pass the resolution on March 9th, that's not a guarantee that this will make it through the General Assembly and eventually have that option. It's just, we talked about last time of different options. This would be an option, and the way that I would draft the resolution for your consideration is in line with what the action that the previous board took in the fall, which would be that the school would close at the end of the 22-23 school year. I know we talked 2 weeks ago about, were we considering trying to get the school closed this summer? I don't think so, and the previous board passed a resolution that said that they wouldn't. So I feel like we owe that to the community if this is the direction that we are going to go. I would further say, if we are gonna do a resolution to close the school, I would tie it to the end of the 22-23 school year, because again, the bond did fail, and I think to put it out longer than that, with everything else that Kim just talked about, paving and everything else, now we're gonna come up with another set of expenses, and I think that would kind of defeat the purpose of all of that. So, again, there's no vote being asked for tonight, but I guess what I'm asking is this a course of action that, you wish us to pursue and you wish me to pursue with the legislators that I've been talking to? I know at the end of the conversation, I think it was Maura who said we need to get on this quickly. I didn't know it would be this quickly, but that's the nature of General Assemblies. They only meet once a year, and if you don't get things introduced at a certain time, we would be basically pushing this off a whole year. And now we're that much farther behind on repairs and all of those things. So I'll stop there and just see. I've talked to a few of you offline, and I know that some of you have strong feelings one way or the other on this. So if you want to share them now with each other or with me, that would be great.
Well, I've worked with the legislature a lot. I mean, having that move forward clearly doesn't mean it's gonna pass. Clearly, there's opportunity for the public to respond to it in public hearing and sessions. The mayors and the selectmen will have input into it as well, because these representatives work closely with them. So, no, I think if you're gonna try this, you need to try it. And it would probably give us the authority to do it, it still only wouldn't make us do it.
Correct.
That was my question.
That is correct.
Yeah, does it bind us to it?
It
if
doesn't.
Came back?
It doesn't at all, but it does give you that. Having said all that, if that's really not your intent, I would think it would be a lot of work on a lot of people's parts, including yours, to go through this and then say, never mind. But to your point, if there's some aspect of this situation that the community has not shared with us at this point, and we heard that and you were compelled to go in a different direction, it's still the Board of Ed's call, if you get permission to do it, to Bob's point. We don't even know if you'll have permission, but that, so I think the resolution would basically be stating your intent. And so that resolution, although it wouldn't bind you, it would be your action that you would have to undo at a later date to stop it. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it wouldn't be like we'd have to take another vote after that. It would be, we're saying, this is our intended course of action if we're allowed to do it. And so then if it went through the General Assembly and got signed, by the governor and went through, then absent any other action from this board, we would plan to close the school at the end of the 22-23 school year.
So
I
wait,
think
can
if
you
to
back-
say anything, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's all right, you're good.
I was just saying, can you back that up a second then, because it sounds to me like the answer is different then. So if it would automatically happen, if we didn't take any other action, then it sounds like we would be bound by whatever the legislature passed. If what they passed was to give us, as Bob said, the authority to do it, that's what I was thinking, if that's what we were
Okay,
doing.
so maybe I misspoke, and let me try to
Okay, no, I'm just checking,
reframe.
I'm just checking.
The resolution we would ask you to pass would be a resolution to close the school at the end of the 22-23 school year. If the General Assembly then gives you that permission, if it goes through, absent any other action subsequent to that by this board, that is what would happen, because your resolution is to close the school. But you as a board could decide, we've now changed our mind.
But isn't our resolution really to ask the General Assembly to give this
It is
permission?
not. It is not. The resolution, the way that we're conceiving it, is a resolution to close and to authorize the staff to do whatever is necessary. And that is the kind of good faith that our legislators are asking for in order for them to go down the road and do that. Basically, if we do this, the way I understand it, you all will vote in 2 weeks to close John Lyman, and the acts of the assembly will validate that act. But to your
Oh,
question.
that's, okay, very different than what I thought we were talking about when you and I did talk about it, because, again, that's one of those things where I'm kind of surprised by our council, because one of the reasons we've done, or this board has done what it's done, was to stay out of court. If we go ahead and take that action on our own to do that, that is immediately grounds for someone to say you didn't have the ability to do that. So I'm just concerned about that. I mean, I'm not.
So
yeah.
to that point, because obviously we have legal counsel and they've advised us in this, the fact that I'm sharing this in this way and it'll be reflected in our minutes is acknowledging exactly what you just said. That we are acknowledging that we do not have the authority to do this. So even a vote to do this on March 9th is not saying we are going to do it, and the resolution will be crafted in a way, and we'll send drafts to all of you so you can tweak that language and push back on it if you think it needs to be stated a different way. I'm certainly not an attorney, so I'm not gonna,
Well, and that,
Yeah.
$3 will get you a cup of coffee, right?
I think it's important for us to all know tonight where we are all, like you said, like, is this gonna be a big waste of your time or is it not? So, we are looking at an elementary school that, 6 months ago, the majority of us who have been on the board for a while would have already closed. So, we've had the, part of our community vote to keep it open, but the majority of our community vote to not pay for anything to get done with it, to keep it open. So I know how those of us who've been on the board for a while feel about this, but I wonder if this is the time or the place to just find out how the new members feel. Because if we are divided or if we're not joined, maybe this is a waste of our time. I mean, if we are all agreeing that, yes, this is something I think we should pursue and we should follow through with what was already begun, then yes, I think that's where we should go with this.
I won't speak for all the new, I can speak for myself. Most other meetings, we've all said and we've all been in support of what exactly we're talking about. What I just asked was because, if anything, COVID taught us that anything can happen. So I was concerned if we're compelled to close, but we couldn't build the additions due to costs, due to
That's
materials.
exactly what I was gonna say.
Right, that's where I was concerned
Right.
legally.
Yes,
that
you
we are
would
legally
retain
bound.
that right.
Right.
Right. Okay.
That's the only place I stand. I
Okay.
still, as my person, I
I'm
think
the
this
same
is
on
where
that.
we need to go.
I said it since the beginning, we should be concentrating on making 4
I know,
state-of-the-art
yeah.
schools.
Yep.
I'm in the same boat, and honestly, the numbers spoke the first referendum
Okay.
to close the school.
Yep.
It's just, both towns had to agree.
Okay, I just wanna make sure we all are in agreement, cause I haven't heard.
However, I
You're
just,
the same way?
Same, yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that, like, I know the wording would be not before, 23, 24, but as we've seen when we went back to get numbers for Lyman, the current numbers we have to fix Brewster, to add on to Brewster, are probably gonna go up. And Doug had given us, a few different options to move the children in our existing buildings and not have to add on at all. He probably could share that with you new people, but, one of them involves, I'm gonna open up a whole can of worms right now, but one of them involves moving 8th grade to this building. And I feel like it's always, nobody wants to talk about it, and I actually joked about this, and maybe people won't think this is funny, but I'm punchy tonight, so, nobody wants to talk about Bruno, but nobody wants to talk about how much room is in this high school. So, at the end of the day, if we're talking about utilizing our space, then we need to talk about
That
what
conversation
people
hasn't
don't
been
want.
said, yeah. But I think
And there are
this,
plenty of high schools, not necessarily in this state, upstate New York, for instance, who have a 7 through 12. We have friends who used to live here that live in Cape Cod, 7 through 12 is their high school. It's not like it doesn't happen. I understand that it's not maybe the popular opinion, but if people don't wanna spend money to educate our kids, we need to do something different. And so I'm not saying I'm against it, but I'm nervous that the numbers are gonna be higher than we thought they were to add on to Brewster. And then we're gonna have a referendum, and then it's gonna fail, and then we're all gonna be sitting here again, twiddling our thumbs and saying, oh no, what are we gonna do?
So it
So,
wasn't
so
I think that-
I'm anxious about saying that I'm 100% okay with it.
Lucy, I think we also need to take into consideration the savings from not having one building and administrative costs, health insurance costs, and on and on and on, can then partially defray the cost of
But
additions for Brewster.
But it's not gonna be immediate, and we still, at the same time, I mean, you know, when we were talking about Lyman, it was what, a year to plan and then a year and a half to happen? Like, this is not gonna happen next year.
No, it won't, but if
So-
we keep pushing it down, it's only gonna get more
Oh,
expensive.
I
And we've
agree
been
with you
kicking
on
this-
that,
This has
for
been
sure.
getting kicked down.
And families
For
are
way too
waiting
way too
and,
long now.
yes.
Right, yeah.
Right, and we can't do that study on Brewster until we finally have a resolution, or if we do have a resolution.
We actually have some numbers on Brewster.
Those
from
are all
an
rough
older
from
study.
2018,
Yeah.
right?
Which,
Right, they have to
which
be
resulted
updated.
in a 2.8 million bonding after state reimbursement, which will be higher than that.
I have a hard time thinking, just going through Brewster and walking through it recently, having no, access before then, or even being in the building, I have a hard time thinking we're gonna be able to put 189 kids in 6 classrooms on that wing. It just doesn't seem feasible for me.
Is that including pre-K being there?
Well, the 6 classrooms, and then if pre-K moved, we'd have the portables, the 2 portables.
Okay.
But the portables are tiny.
And how old are they?
I don't,
And that's
yeah, I
the
don't
other
know that
thing, is
answer.
like, we kept using portables at Lyman until there was a hole in the floor and then the kids couldn't be there
Just
anymore,
like the
so.
ones here.
And I mean, I also have said, and I'll say it again, like, if we do add on to Brewster, I am not voting yes unless we add another cafeteria or a separate gym. Cause there's no way you're gonna add over 100 kids and not do that. It's just not appropriate, so that's unfortunately gonna just add on to the cost, but
Right.
I just don't think it's the right thing to do. If we're gonna do it, we need to do it right.
And right now, there's no way possible to do any type of gym, physical ed, anything, phys ed during lunch waves, right?
Right.
Yes.
Cause it's
But
a
right
gym,
now-
a
And
cafeteria,
did that
and
floor
a
ever
Really,
get
yeah,
fixed?
there's
So if
no
we add,
in between.
if we're adding assemblies in, we're getting back to pre-COVID, now we've got time where even during lunch wave, we can't be
Right.
having any kind of access to that auditorium. It's just not feasible.
Did the gym floor ever get replaced there?
Did not, it got removed last year, and it got
Again.
reprioritized
At
again
Brewster,
this
yeah.
year. The repair is holding, but we repair it every year.
Right, and then we're just throwing money away. I mean, that's the same thing as if we don't put the money into Picket Lane, then we're just throwing money away, but we're not on that right now, so. I'm hesitant to be 100% okay with it. That's my stance right now.
If I could circle back to the issue with the legislation. Rebecca, can I chime in with you here? Who would represent us at a committee meeting at the Legislative Office Building? I mean, you know that building inside and out. It's like,
Bob knows
would
it
we
as
have the
well, if not
ability
better than I
to?
do.
Would it purely be attorneys or like yourself or?
I think the way that this is gonna go, the way most of these things go, is that, so these conversations get had, if this body was to say, this is what we're doing, then, and there's already, this is one, I think it's a short session, is it a short session, Bob? So,
Short session.
all this stuff has already happened behind the scenes because you can't put bills out forever, so that, it would all happen there. I mean, this would be something that they've already had conversations with our council, and other folks, and that's what was proposed, I think, to us. So from here, you know, what Doug's looking for is some kind of, an indication from us about which way we're gonna go, and if we are, this is new to me, I should have seen it, but it's new to me, that if we are gonna go that direction, then we need to vote and take that step first so that they can validate it. Now I can see why it's a validating act, but, so it's already done. We're not gonna be up there.
Will our attorney have an impassioned argument of why? That's what I'm a little bit nervous about.
Well, I mean, again, I mean, yeah, I mean, there'll be a public hearing and they'll put on the dog and pony show and talk about exactly
Probably
why.
the Superintendent would be asked to testify.
Right. And
Probably
to
be it.
get maybe even some others as well to basically say, so we have this conundrum. We were told that we couldn't amend the district agreement to let us close the school, yet we couldn't get the money to keep the school open. So, and you were asking me more what I think, and I really think what you guys do about 4 strong schools, not strong school, but 4 good, excellent schools, and, you know, that this is the way to go, I guess, and Doug knows this already, this is where I have kind of a handicap by being an attorney, is that this process stuff gets me a little, tied up because there is this whole issue of, okay, so how do you write something to basically say that, you know, how do I as a board member vote to close the school when people voted specifically not to? And the reason that a district agreement means that both towns have to vote is exactly for this reason. It's exactly for this. Now, do I agree with how this all turned out? No. But, so that process piece of it that makes me worry about what does it mean to have a district agreement in some ways. On the other hand, as Doug said, it's very specific. It would be very specific to this instance. It wouldn't change the agreement. But it's that problem.
Yeah, it wouldn't change the law, it would just change an exception.
Right, an exception, you know what I mean, Bob,
Yeah,
about that.
But, I mean, I think the resolution, Doug should say, we voted to close the school.
Oh, yes,
we
it
can't
would-
do the
it would
thing.
have the whole
It has
history.
the history when, oh, we did this thing. That
It
was-
still may not mean that people agree, but it
Right.
wouldn't be like this standalone, just two sentence, we're
Right.
closing this school. It would go all the way back and bring all that history in, and I think that's partly also what the members of our legislative delegation who would carry this
They need to
would.
see it.
Correct,
They need to
correct.
see that we said that.
That's correct.
And it's also important to note that if we go ahead with this resolution and the legislature supports it or allows it, it doesn't change anything else that's in the agreement, the regional agreement between the two towns. That stays as is. All this does is just resolve this particular issue with John Lyman School.
Because
Does not
there's
change,
disconnect.
does not change the intent of the remaining, the rest of the agreement.
But I think it's really important to focus on the fact that the reason that's true is because of this strange disconnect. Because the fact is, there's an argument to be made that it does in that way, because if we can just go to the legislature to change the outcome anytime we don't like it, that's the slippery slope argument. I think we need to be very clear that this is an unusual circumstance where, you know, the vote said one thing, but the outcome was we can't do it. So we are in that position, and if we can't have the money to do this, it's not just about the fact that we do all see this as being the best for the district in general, and that's what we're here for too, is what's best for our students.
And this is
So-
not happening because we don't like the outcome. The outcome has put us in the middle of we can't do anything,
Right.
one way or the other, and that just can't go forward.
We can't
You
be,
know,
we can't be
it's either
paralyzed.
close the school or keep it open and fund it.
Right.
It's, you know,
Yeah.
you can't be stuck in the middle with nothing, so it has nothing to do with whether we like or not like the outcome.
Yeah, the other
We
thing
have
I
to
would
be able
add,
to do something.
which may be like obvious, but to state the obvious, I think Lucy articulated pretty well a position that there are some, perhaps many, in the community that have a little bit of sticker shock with the proposed budget, our previous item. My thought would be, maybe we could demonstrate to those people the fiscal responsibility through this other, now again, we wouldn't know the outcome, but I think we might actually know the outcome of the GA prior to our budget referendum, and again, people might still vote down our budget this year, because they just look at it as this year's budget, but I do think there's an opportunity for us to educate people on, yes, the upcoming budget is gonna be an increase, but the next one should be a significant decrease, and even to some of the suggestions that Lucy was hinting at around staffing and sharing and all of that. In year two, that will happen kind of naturally if the school closes, because we're just not gonna need as many folks. And you all, those that have been on the board, you know that, because we've been through those numbers, and Kim has kind of cited that. So, again, not that the two are joined at the hip, but I think
No, I think
it's an
it's-
important thing to consider
Messaging is good.
as we're having this whole kind of fiscal
Yeah.
responsibility discussion.
Can you, and to Missy's point, I think what you said earlier, Doug, was that when you were worrying about if we do this, then what happens? But that if things changed in the meanwhile, because of the Brewster numbers, because of other things, we could still act to do something different. This would give us the permission, this would have given us the validation of what we took, but we could take another action if we needed to. Is that right?
Yeah, you could, and I think the point about 2018 is a good one too. Our numbers are different now than they were 3 years ago. Our enrollment numbers, we've had conversations about different ways we can do things. We haven't even come forward as a staff, even though plenty of people have begged for it, with, like, what is our recommendation for how grade levels should be configured? Is it the same as it was 3 years ago? Is it different? We felt like it would be inappropriate to even go down that path absent some semblance of understanding about whether Lyman was gonna stay open or not. And again, just to reiterate, if you take the action on March 9th and it passes this board, that still doesn't guarantee it passes the General Assembly. So we may be no closer to a solution, but I think last time we talked about what are some options. I feel like this is one that we ought to pursue if people want us to pursue it.
So this is the legislative relief that you discussed?
Correct.
So what would be the judicial relief?
My understanding, and if you need to, we can call an executive session at some time, is that doesn't seem as viable of an option for our current situation. And I wish I could explain that better, but
Okay, I just
no, I
didn't
appreciate you
understand what
saying
either of
that.
them were, so.
I ran both of those things.
I have them written down, so that's
Yep,
why.
I ran both of them up the
Yeah.
flagpole, and this is the one that kind of jumped out as the clearest path forward.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? If you have some, okay.
Sounds like it.
Do you
yeah.
have the feedback that you need, Doug?
I do. I didn't hear anyone say don't go forward. So, and again, this doesn't bind you to a vote in 2 weeks. It just says we're gonna prep for that.
And we have the COVID updates.
Yes, and my computer screen isn't coming up right now, so I'm gonna shift to my phone. So just give me 1 moment here. For anybody watching, I'm not texting anyone. I'm not checking ESPN or anything like that. This is just where my notes are, and my computer screen isn't going. So you know, we had a conversation 2 weeks ago about the fact that the governor had made an announcement about an optional mask projected that turned out to be the case coming up here on the 28th, and I kind of stated my recommendation and the staff's recommendation that be our position, and the board didn't vote, but that was the consensus, that was the right thing to do, and so we've put some information out to our community, and I think first and foremost, just to repeat, we're not saying we're getting rid of masks, but we're saying we are significantly pivoting to a mask optional position, which from a survey I saw earlier today of districts is where about 90% or more of the districts, maybe even closer to 95%, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, are going. So that doesn't mean it's the right decision, but we're kind of in good company, I would think, with the vast majority of districts. We did make a few exceptions, and we outlined those in the communication. One of those is on our buses. So that's kind of governed by a different directive that goes even beyond school systems. And so that would include not just buses to and from school, but to athletic competitions, field trips, any time we're using transportation to take our learners places, everybody is masked, the driver, the adults, the children. Another place that we enacted locally was in our health clinics, which some people didn't know, that's what we called them where I came from, nurses' offices, whatever we want to call them. The place you go when you're sick, okay, where you see the nurse. We feel like that is consistent with what's happening in the healthcare outside of schools. So even though that is not required, like it is for the buses, we feel like that is a best practice. And then the last one has to do with people returning off quarantine from COVID, and that continues to be our guidance, and so that would continue to be our expectation. Now, a lot of people are excited that we're moving in this direction, and I count myself as one of them, but one of the things I want to caution everyone in this space is that part of what the General Assembly approved is permission for the Commissioner of the Department of Health to reinstate a school mask mandate if she sees fit, or if he sees fit, if somebody else replaces the current commissioner. So that could happen, and people need to know that. And I think people need to understand that and I've said this in a few emails that I've responded to folks, the masking only started in RSD13 because it was a state mandate, and we followed that state mandate. And now in the absence of that mandate, we are backing away from that. And so I'm not saying there couldn't be a situation where we locally would come to you as a board with working with our local health director and temporarily reinstate a mask mandate. I don't really see that as a likely scenario based on our conversations with our local health director and with the state. So really, the more realistic scenario would be if there's another surge that really inundates our healthcare systems and our hospital systems to the point where it feels like what's happening in schools is significantly contributing to that. I don't think the Commissioner of Health would hesitate to reinstate the mask mandate. But I don't think she would do that lightly because, and I don't want to speak for her, but I've been on a number of things where she's spoken, she also understands the social, emotional, and relational toil that masking has had, not just on our learners, but all of us. I would love to not have my mask on right now and be doing this meeting that way. I'd love to be able to see facial expressions. I'd love to know what some of you actually look like. I mean, really. I mean, it's just, and as we said last time, if this is where we're going eventually, unless you're arguing that we should be in masks forever, we have to find a way to get there. Now, we did have some concerns that some of you shared with me, some parents shared with me, and to be just, completely transparent on this, my colleagues are hearing this in all of their districts too. There is a real concern about children and adults who continue to mask by choice, potentially being bullied, being ridiculed, teased, and everything kind of in between for the fact that they choose to wear a mask, or because in the case of one of our learners, their parents say, you're gonna wear the mask. And so in response to that, our principals are instituting lessons at all ages this week in preparation for next Monday. That doesn't guarantee that none of that stuff is gonna happen, but at least we're having those conversations and trying to get ahead of it. And we will deal with those situations if and when they happen, because it is mask optional. And we want to support adults and children who choose to mask or who have to mask because they're coming off quarantine. And to my earlier point, if you're gonna ride the bus, you're gonna wear a mask, at least for now. That's the rule. And so we're not getting away with them completely. The other thing we wanna make sure that folks know, and I know at one point these were in more limited supply, but now it seems like the state is sending us more than we know what to do with. We have lots and lots of at-home test kits, and we're getting even more. And so, we really want folks who want those at-home test kits to call the school and to get them so they can have them. In the beginning, we were saying, we only want to give them out if you're symptomatic. Now we're saying, if you just want them, please don't go crazy and take like 30 of them or something. But if you just want to have some on hand because you're concerned about next week or future weeks, and again, that's employee, that's learner, parent, whoever wants them, we are happy to give them out. A couple other points, and then I'll open for questions to see if the staff wants to add anything. And I know some board members and some staff members have been part of some of these state level conversations. The state has recently put out some updated guidance. And I'm not saying this to be disrespectful to the state. I know they work really hard and they try. But there isn't a whole lot of guidance in that guidance. And we've gone from a place where basically we've done everything the state has told us to do to a place where now everything is a local decision. In fact, if you listen to these state calls, and I've been on many of them, there's a new term that is out there. It's a 2-word term. It's called risk tolerance. And that is what they keep saying. When somebody says, oh, should we mask in this situation, or should we do this, or should we do that? The answer we are now getting is not a health-related answer like we used to get from the state. It is now, you have to determine how important it is in your schools to have children and adults that are not required to mask. And to that point, what is your tolerance as a community to take on that risk to people's health and safety? And there's not a right answer to that question, in my opinion. We each have to do that. But to my earlier point, the vast majority of districts in Connecticut, that's where they are going with the mask optional next week. And it is a risk. We don't know what's going to happen. So we're going to continue to monitor and see where things are going. So with that in mind, the staff and I have been talking, ever since the governor made this announcement. I think it's important to share tonight. What happens to other mitigation strategies? What happens to large gatherings of crowds, and what happens to social distancing, and like the way we're cohorting for lunches and all of those other things? And this is where we are as a team right now. We'd like to leave all those other things alone for now. We feel like removing the masks is a big deal. And so while that's happening, we'd like to leave everything else in place. Not forever, but at least for several weeks, at least so we can be assured that this action is not going to take us backwards. And I'll give you one example, which if you're a middle school parent or employee, you probably know this already. There's been an already once postponed social that was scheduled for, I believe, next Friday the 4th. And as we're talking as an admin team, we're like, how is that going to be to have all these 6th, 7th, and 8th graders together in a confined space the very first week we're out of masks? But we also thought, how could we ask them to come masked to an event like that when we've kind of said we're going away from masks? So the decision that was made, I think very wisely, by the principal, Cheryl Gonzalez, and supported by our team is, as much as we want to have that social, we're going to put it off for a little bit until we kind of understand. And that just gives you an idea of how the staff and I are processing all of this. So I know that we have folks who have emailed us with very detailed questions about what about this and what about that and what about, and all these kind of nuanced little situations. I don't know that we're in a position where we can foresee where all of that is going to go. But out of the gate, it's mask optional, and everything else kind of stays the way it is until we see where we are. So, Jen, Kevin, Corey, anything to add to that? I know we've all been part of those conversations. I don't know. I talked a long time, and I apologize.
No, Doug, I think it's very well stated.
Absolutely.
I really do.
Yeah. And I feel good about where we are. And maybe we're wrong, but I feel like this is where we need to be.
That social was pushed off, but it was pushed off to a specific date, right?
I don't know that
Last
she's.
Friday in March.
I think it's March
The 25th. March 25th.
Yeah. But the caveat with that is,
We'll see how it goes.
right.
Yeah.
And we felt like 3 weeks was enough that we would know at that point. And so, I didn't know that answer. Thank you for.
Do we have an update for CIAC, for athletics, for masking?
My understanding is that they wanted to end the masking like a while ago, and they were told they had to wait till the 28th. So my understanding is that,
And
that-
basketball's done tonight, so.
They're done tonight.
Yep.
yeah, so
The boys, right? Girls?
we have a
The girls are
home
done.
playoff
Girls
game
are
next
CRHS
week. So that will be a non-mask event. I shouldn't say that. A non-mask required event. My suspicion is a lot of people that show up to watch, and maybe others, will have their masks on.
But also if they travel to a school that district has decided to maintain masks, then people might have to be.
Then we will be
Right.
required to
theirs.
follow
Yeah.
whatever the rules are in that district. That is correct. So it is possible, to your point, Missy, that.
And on the bus, that's not.
Oh, the bus for sure, regardless of, the bus is a non-negotiable. And we also realize we're gonna need some help from parents and others to support the masking on the bus. Because we know, like human nature, if you're not masking other places, now you're just gonna think it's a hassle to do it on the bus. But we're asking our bus drivers to enforce that, as hard as that is, while they're looking at the road and everything else. And so the support we can get from families, we just need that.
Can that be part of the discussion that the principals are having with each school too?
Oh, yes,
Not
absolutely it is.
bullying, but
Yes,
really
yes.
to reiterate that the buses are, can't say federal mandate, but it's not out of our hands.
Yeah, I mean, as far as learners are concerned, that's our rule. I don't think we have to say federal or anything. I mean, I just think.
No, I know,
but-
I just don't know how you translate.
No, but I think it's important, and they'd know that if they've ever gotten on a public bus or a train or a plane or anything. I mean, that's just the rule right now. You may not like it, but that's the rule.
And then kids are putting masks on, so I'm just concerned some kids aren't coming to school with them. So if they were fired in the nurse's office, kids aren't riding the bus, they get dropped off. Do we have the supply of masks in each school to be able to?
Oh,
provide it
yes.
for nurses' offices?
And,
I
In
just
fact,
don't
if
want a
they
kid
want,
coming to the nurse
if
and
they
we
want
don't
one
have
of
masks.
these, we have a lot of these, because we got lots of them, and nobody's wearing them, except me and Kevin.
I have.
Oh, you got two on? Oh, all right.
My mailbox at work is full of these white ones that students don't want because they look like a diaper. No, I don't want that one. I want a blue one.
That's the great analogy. Made my night.
We are really in a transition period. When COVID hit and, you know, masking, no masking, everything just kind of evolved. And one of the things when I was on the last Zoom meeting, it was for at least a couple hours, but the last one was with the board chairs and the Department of Health, Department of Education. And it's new. This is why we're not getting those metrics, those guidelines, because the virus is only 2 years old. And because it's only 2 years old, they really don't have enough data and any consistent data that they can come down with specific guidelines. If you do this, this is gonna happen, or the percentage, you know, the percentage of this happening is gonna be such and such. They don't have that. They are concerned about the safety of children. They do talk about risk. Glasses, I'm sorry. They do talk about risk, but they also talk about, you know, you look at your community, what is your positivity rate? And, you know, Doug, I know we've had some questions, you know, why is the superintendent making the decisions? He is making decisions, but he's also sharing those with the board, so they're right out here. We're well aware of everything that's going on, and we will be going forward. It's gonna be monitored carefully. I think right now, we feel comfortable with the masks only because they seem to be like a safety protocol, a safety piece that we have that's gonna protect us from this virus. This has scared the daylights out of all of us. And now we need to take this safety away, and it is scary. So you're gonna have some people who are gonna hang on to the mask and not wanna let it go. Other people are gonna just throw it away, never look at it again. But we're in that transition period, and I think it's gonna be difficult for us as well as for our kids. There's gonna be anxiety, but I think it's gonna work out. I think the way the district is working it out is it's a transition from starting to take the masks off, but all these other protocols stay in place. And then we try another and see how it works. If it's not working well, or if there's a surge, as Doug said, then we take a step back and then we try it again. We don't know what's gonna happen going forward. So we kinda have to work together and understand and be patient and, you know, and hope for the best and just see how it goes going forward.
I think the patience part is huge, like it's
Yeah,
absolutely
we have
huge.
to be
I mean, if
patient.
these DPH calls that Lucy's talking about, they've given exact strict guidelines every single week. They've given like basically a playbook for COVID.
Yep.
And then a couple weeks ago, it all went away. And it put a lot of stress on Pam Bransford, Jen Key, Doug, to make conscious decisions. And we need to be patient. You know, we need to say, okay, we are removing masks. We're leaving these guidelines in place for other things. If there's issues, and people just need to speak up. They need to say what's going on. You know, if there's issues in schools and the kids don't feel safe, we want to hear it.
Right, and I'm sure Doug is gonna keep us updated on as regular basis as possible with the parents, the board, and, you know, the parents through Parent Square. And, so we're kind of like all in this boat together, trying to figure out, make sure it floats. Any other thoughts?
I think it's great the way that you come at it in terms of limiting the number of variables. You're changing it one time. I think that, you know, we're gonna move in this direction that's scary to a lot of people, and so letting them know straight out, we're gonna keep these other things in place, and we're gonna see And that's that feedback loop. That's, you know, the policy is set up, you guys set this policy up specifically to be overseeing it, but to give Doug the direction and then let him make the decisions. And then it's a feedback loop. If it's not working, then it's gotta come back to us. So I think to your point too, Lindsay, and the patience and the trust. I mean, even when they do talk on these calls about the risk factor, they did much earlier on give us actual numbers about things that they had. Things like when we change from this many days of quarantine to these many days, the risk only changes by 2% that you're gonna get COVID. I mean, things like that. So the fact that they're putting this decision out to us now means their risk tolerance in that range is where they need to see it. And I'm just gonna have to go with that until we see what happens.
Okay, item number 9, Director of Finance report,
I cover that under the budget.
under the budget. Okay. Item 10, new action items. We have a vote to approve the high school DECA field trip request. I believe it has to do with careers, and I believe you all received a copy of it, Meg sent it out. Do we have a vote to approve?
I move it. Second.
So it's moved by Bob, seconded by John. Is there any discussion, any questions? Yes.
The only concern I had is that it said 1 to 2 chaperones, and I know that they don't know how many children are going yet, but I just feel like if they're traveling on a plane, I would feel more comfortable if there was 2 people. Especially, also COVID aside, if for some reason the one chaperone falls ill and they're there, I just think that they should have 2.
Is there a ratio that
I was
we've
just
used in the
gonna ask.
past?
Okay.
I don't know that answer. I'm sure there is. But I don't know that answer. We can get it. Does anyone know that answer?
Would there need to be one?
Is there a required ratio?
I don't know that.
I'm not sure what the policy says. We can
Okay.
probably-
We'll look that up and get that to you.
I think Missy's point is good though, that because of where we are, it doesn't hurt to have 2.
Yeah, I think the challenge is if it's like 3 children, do you want, it's like at what point, I think that was the ratio question was a good one too, so. I think we can convey to the high school that ideally there would be 2 unless it's a very small number. I mean, is that kind of where you guys are?
Missy? Okay.
Now, I know with some of the field trips, I don't think DC's on here, right? There was issues between.
DC is the next one.
Yes,
That's
DC
the
for
next
next,
one.
the next DC. yeah.
DC is 9
But for November.
Okay, so I can wait on that one.
Next year.
Well, I guess we could say it in either one of them.
DC
I know
is
there was an
essentially
issue with the DC trip between, students being able to go that were vaccinated or unvaccinated. And that it falls based on the travel agent and the guidelines for the travel agent. Do we know if any of these are affected or changed? Or does it just have nothing to do with the?
I'm just over, one of the sponsors is in the room, but I don't think he was prepared to speak on this tonight, but, I
I
think
guess
our
the
position
request for
all,
the
I think our
trip is
position all along has
open.
been whatever,
required.
the venues that we're attending and whatever the rules are, that's what we would
You gotta follow
follow.
That's
Um,
correct.
Right.
So, I mean, do you wanna tell them what it is as of today?
Sorry, Craig.
Changing literally every day is changing. And right now, the only place that was requiring it was Kennedy Center, which was different than a week ago, which was different than 2 weeks ago.
So we'll just monitor that.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
I'll abstain.
We have 1 abstention, Missy. Item B here, we need a vote to approve the high school senior class field trip request, which is for November of 2022, so this would be for next year's graduating class.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Bob,
Oh, this is not this year's, it's next year's.
no,
Next
yes.
year's.
Okay.
Seconded by Maura, Rebecca, by Maura. Any discussion?
Double second.
I had one question. Generally, isn't this trip held like in the spring? And I was
That's
curious
o-
as
that's
to
only
why,
for this year.
That
why
was-
they go
yeah, it just got
November?
moved.
They usually go in November, they're going in the spring, I think, because of.
Oh,
the current.
okay. All right, I didn't realize that.
Is that correct? Yes, I got the head nod from Craig, so.
It's always in November.
Yeah.
We're
They
less
usually
ranked
go in
bunch
the
They
fall.
always go in November?
fall than they are in the spring.
I guess maybe I'm thinking about when
Check
I
that
was in
out.
high school, and I still do remember. We went in the spring, later, later in the school year.
My mom was a chaperone at night.
Okay, any other comments?
I'm sorry.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Good, that's passed. Okay, we're on item number 11, I'm looking at the time. Public comment. These comments can refer to items that are on the agenda or any other items. Again, I'm gonna mention that we are gonna have a 3-minute time limit. There are quite a few people here, and we wanna make sure that we get a chance to hear everyone. We expect comments to be respectful and directed to the entire board. And we'd like you to come up to the microphone and state your name and your town. And that's it. And please abide by the 3-minute rule. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Hi, my name is Michelle Gohagan, and this is Daryl Gohagan, and we live in Rockwall, Connecticut. Our daughter attends Regional School District 13. We are here tonight to communicate our grave concerns about what our family, specifically our daughter, has been experiencing regarding racist comments, actions, and threats. Our grave concerns about the district's ability to understand these racist attacks and their ability to keep our child and other children of color safe both physically and emotionally. I convinced my husband to move to this community when our daughter was young. He worried that such a small community with little diversity would welcome a family like ours. Having worked in this district and loved working here, I assured him that this community would protect our child and she would receive the education she deserved. Unfortunately, his worries were justified. Our child, and with speaking with others about their children's experiences, have been ones filled with racially insensitive statements, racist comments, such as the prevalent use of the N-word, and most recently escalating behavior that included outright racist threats. Our children are not safe. They are not protected. There is something uniquely devastating about your child being targeted because of the color of her skin. It is something we cannot properly put into words. So instead we'll say this. It may be difficult to accept that such prevalent racism exists within our schools, but please believe that it does. Please believe us. If you turn on the local news, you will see that this is a problem not unique to Durham and Middlefield. What can be unique, however, is how we choose to respond. Last year, Regional School District 13 passed our equity policy, in which the district committed to adopting procedures to ensure equitable school community inclusive of race, diversity in race, ethnicity, language, gender, cultural values, and family belief systems, and improving cultural competencies in serving our racially, culturally, and ethnically diverse students, families, and communities. We are asking that you please make us in the community aware of how you're ensuring the commitments made in this policy are being carried out within the district today and in the future. Determining how to combat these acts of hate is a difficult commitment to navigate and plan for. However, we do ask that you plan for it, and with a sense of urgency, by empowering our superintendent, administrators, educators, staff, and students with the tools and resources needed to stop these acts of hate within our schools. Because you can either empower the many who want more inclusive schools by acting, or you can embolden the few by staying silent. Although this change might not come soon enough to help our child, we hope that no other young child will ever have to experience what our family, our child has endured. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Maureen Funk. I have 3 daughters in 3 schools here now. We moved here from West Haven in fall of 2020. And I'll say, unfortunately, my children have seen and heard more racial slurs and bullying in their short time here than they did in a much longer time in West Haven. And your composure is amazing. I would like to thank you for that. And thank you for the board for all you do. I do appreciate what you're doing. I would say if the board would put as much thought into their forthcoming plan to avoid masking bullying as they would into racial and gender and other forms of bullying, your time will be well served. I would also echo the statement that I'll make even a little more directly, that the staff needs more training. I know of at least 2 incidences that my daughters heard in 2 of the schools, not all of them, where a teacher was in earshot of a racial slur and did nothing. Yes, should the kids have stood up and screamed at that time too? Do I understand why maybe they can't do that sometimes or don't want to? It's not just the students. The adults in this community have work to do. And that includes all of us. And what their family has gone through in the last week is disgusting. They should feel safe for their daughter to go to school. And they do not feel that way right now. And that's not fair. And I think just recognizing a comment is nice and whatever, but something needs to be done about it. Thank you.
Ellen Steffen of Durham, Policy 5114, the heinous and racist acts that I have heard about in the past few weeks have checked almost more than 10 of those examples of acts that this board should leverage for no less than expulsion. Risk tolerance, how much are we willing to tolerate before we risk being identified as board members, community members, and school members who tolerate racism and are perhaps a wee bit racist ourselves? As a member of the Wellbeing Committee, I ask that I will be requesting and ask that we discuss this specifically at our Wellbeing Committee meeting, because we worked hard in that committee to come up with our equity policy. We need to put our money where our mouth is.
Good evening. I am David Zemelski from Durham, a 40-year resident of District 13. All 3 of my children graduated from Coggin-Sharp High School. 2 of my grandchildren are presently enrolled in the district. As I understand the details of the racial incident, this is a thoughtless and unconscionable act that bears an unflinching, honest look at, not just by the Board of Ed, but by all of us. There is a tendency in primarily white towns such as ours to sweep racial incidents under the rug and allow one to think that there's no problem with the district's handling of and outlook towards race and racial equality. Nothing, of course, could be further from the truth. I know that for myself, finding an unprejudiced and genuinely anti-racist way of seeing the world is an arduous and profoundly difficult struggle. Ideas of how the world works, how white people interact with people of color, starts at an early age. Well-meaning people like so many of us in the audience tonight, and I'd hope to think that that would mean all of us, will inadvertently stumble in our efforts to make sure that our world is a safe and equitable place for all of us, whether it is a question of one's color or sexual orientation. And I want to be clear about using the word anti-racist, a phrase often misunderstood. It simply means that the actions, thoughts, and words of someone are designed to help eliminate racism. To be neutral is to allow more racism to occur. That is why our Board of Ed is in an excellent position right now to forge policy that would only educate our children on the heinous and poisonous power of prejudice and help these same children to be aware, emphatic and strong in their attempts to learn ways to help all people to understand and love one another, as opposed to allowing hate and oppression to go unanswered in our school. The perpetrators of this act are also in a good position to learn how hurtful and thoughtless their actions were. Our Board of Ed can help make a positive difference for them and all other students in our district. This situation did not come out of nowhere. There's an undercurrent that has been circulating for a long time. Let's not call this CRT, which most of us know is not taught in our schools, nor is it about making white children feel bad about the very complicated and sordid history of slavery and racism in our country since 1619. Simply stated, this incident is an opportunity for our whole town to learn empathy, tolerance, and ways to look at the unfair and illegal constellation of racially motivated acts that is sadly so prevalent in our society. Why can't we come out the other side of this problem as a town which loudly and proudly saying that we can work to eliminate racism here? If we did so, we'd be a shining example for the whole state, even the nation. It's up to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Eileen Bucket. I'm from Durham. I just want to say that we do need to believe Michelle. My daughter's a student at Strong, and the N-word is used so often, it's no longer shocking to my daughter, which is shocking to me as a parent. She did not learn this from home. She did not learn it from my family. She learned it from school. And I have to say, I think that is devastating to the region, to this district, and you should be ashamed. So I believe Michelle, and I know at least one instance that the teacher heard it. So something has to be done. Thank you.
Hello, I am a student at Coggins, and on behalf of as a student of RSD13, I would just like to say I'm so embarrassed for the way that my peers have behaved in the past, and I'm really sorry that that's happened to you. And I would also like to say as a student that I have heard a lot of incidents. I've heard, I went to Strong and Coggins. Oh my God. I think it turned off.
Is the working now?
Can you help her?
Ken's not here.
Oh, no. Okay. I would like to say that when I was at Strong, I heard someone refer to a black student as a monkey, and they said it very loudly. I heard it. I was sitting across the room, and there was no way that my teacher did not hear it, and she did not say a word. And there have been so many other incidents where people have heard things and not said anything. And I would like to say that the more we don't speak, the more that these people who are saying these really offensive things in a very public place just feel, encouraged to do so, It's like when they teach us, if somebody's bullying someone, if you're standing by, you're part of it. If we're standing by, then we're a part of this treatment, and it's really just not okay. And I don't want to be in a school or in a community where we're all a part of this kind of treatment. So I would just like to say that I would really appreciate if some change were to be made and more punishment were to be inflicted when people say these heinous things. Thank you. Oh, I have to say my name?
Please.
My name is Julia Talbert Slagle.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick Holden from Durham.
I'm here tonight to share the words and thoughts of my brother, or the closest to a brother that I have. As someone who is Black, he unfortunately shares many experiences to the racial incidents that have happened at Strong and throughout the district recently. And he has given me permission to read from these experiences that he shared with me tonight. And I'm quoting him here. The only reason I have to be nice to you is because it's Black History Month. I wouldn't have to deal with you if it wasn't for MLK. Go back to the cotton fields. Oh look, it's the Jamaican beef patty. The time a teacher pulled me out of class because he wanted to tell me that Michael Brown was not killed because of racism. Getting beaten up on the schoolyard called the N-word and teachers ignoring it. And a teacher crying in class after making me, quoting him, read the N-word out of a book. These are just a handful of phrases and incidents that rattle around in my head from my school years. I felt helpless and isolated. I was bullied constantly and the faculty did nothing, or worse, the faculty would punish me. I found myself sitting in the office far more than my bullies. I would lash out and yell at my bullies, and the faculty would punish me but never offer me any emotional or mental support. So I stayed silent, which led me to being mentally and occasionally physically bullied at school. When I moved to RSD13, I did not know about race. The world quickly and brutally taught me that lesson. But I wish the school taught everyone, because glossing over slavery for a few weeks isn't enough. Race should be discussed at school often, candidly, and respectfully. Diversity should be celebrated and children should be listened to. The faculty should also reevaluate how it handles punishments. Offering support and understanding is far more effective than punishing victims into silence. A few teachers excelled at this, but only a few, end quote. My brother and I graduated in 2016. Time has passed with a few of these experiences occurring nearly a decade ago, and I'm aware that there have been some changes when it comes to addressing these incidents. However, the fact that my brother's experiences and the racial incidents this year and around here are nearly a decade apart speak for itself. There is a systematic and dangerous crisis of hate and intolerance in our towns and in our school system, and not nearly has been done enough to heal it. For a district that prides itself on our core ethical values, values that were drilled into my brother and I like gospel, we sure seem to forget all about them, about respect for others, responsibility to our peers, honesty about ourselves and our past, kindness towards those different than us, and the courage to talk about difficult problems when racial issues come into focus. I find this hypocritical and absolutely despicable. I know time, I just like to share one final memory from my brother, quote. One time I was being bullied. I felt like I was going to have a panic attack and the teacher wasn't there, so I left without permission. The teacher later found me outside and yelled at me. He was taking me to the office, no understanding, no compassion. I was treated like a delinquent. But then another teacher came by and offered to take me the rest of the way to the office. Instead, she took me to her empty classroom and listened to me as I explained my pain through tears. The understanding teachers and friends I had were the most valuable thing that I had. If more teachers were understanding, then I believe my world would have been much brighter. I look back and I see so much darkness and unbelievable cruelty. It can only be combated by understanding and allowing teachers more flexibility in how they handle discipline. End quote.
Thank you, Patrick.
Katie Fleming, Durham. Wasn't planning to talk tonight, but I just want to say it's not up to people of color to fight this battle. We are privileged white people that have the power, and we need to do something about this. It's just escalating. If you follow Facebook in this town, it's escalating. And I would like the board to put it on the agenda. I don't know how that works, I don't know all your rules, but it should be on the agenda. What are you doing about this? And is there a training, is there active training, like starting tomorrow, if it hasn't started already, for the teachers and the students and the faculty, everyone, on how to learn the internal stuff, do the internal process that they need to do to be able to step up when these incidents happen, and be empowered to act on behalf of these people that are being abused.
who would like to speak?
Would you like to go first, sir?
No, go ahead, I've already spoke once.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Nicole Arcolani. I'm here to discuss my treatment by this board at the last meeting. It is connected to the educational program of the district, as bullying has been a topic of discussion in the district and directly affects the children in this community. I'd first like to clarify for the chairman and for the board that being direct, assertive, and honest in a discussion is not bullying. Pointing out hypocrisy is not bullying. Asking a clarifying question is not bullying. Criticism is not bullying. Having a difference of opinion is not bullying. I don't even necessarily think that what happened to me at that meeting was bullying, but it was extremely inappropriate. Whether or not you agree with what I am saying does not allow you the ability to scream and yell over me. Also, when you incorrectly use the term bully, it delegitimizes the word and makes it more difficult for people who are actually being bullied. Lucy, you stated that public comment needs to be addressed to the entire board. However, I wanted to remind you that this board is not a single mind, and when there is an individual who expresses their viewpoint during a meeting or references their experience during a meeting, I am entirely within my right to ask clarifying questions. When we ask clarifying questions, we gain insight on where that individual is coming from. Had I been allowed to finish my comment, I would have said that offering educational information to the board and to parents might help to ease some of the anxiety involved with allowing other people the opportunity to go maskless. Education and access to accurate information empowers people to make an informed decision and helps people to be comfortable in allowing others to make their own decisions as well. In the future, I would ask that the board use better discretion when silencing parents. I also hope that moving forward, the board can work with parents to have an open and honest conversation, even if our viewpoints differ. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Anyone else would like to speak? I know Carl, yeah, I was just gonna make sure. Can't forget her. I think it's yours.
Thank you. I'd like to commend Lucy for her comments about taking another look at the budget. I think it's a great move. And I hear about this storage building, field house, high school stadium project, finishing that up. It's a luxury item, it's a want. Would it be nice to have it? Oh yes, it would be nice to have it. But I also sit here and I listen to comments about, well, we haven't been able to do this. We need to do maintenance here. We need to do maintenance there. We got things we've been putting off here. This project is another building that's gonna add more maintenance, more upkeep, more staff to take care of. Just wanted to throw that out there. And I got a letter here the person asked me to read. Chuck Stingle, Durham, Connecticut. With declining enrollment, maintaining staff and programs at current levels is not acceptable. Declining enrollment is primarily what's causing increase per student expenses. Please reduce staff expenses commensurate to enrollment declines. You would surely increase staff if student population grew. Now it's time to cut it. It's sad, but a reality if you want the budget to pass. With declining enrollment, a 5% net budget increase is not acceptable. The field storage building is not required. Adequate storage space exists in the high school or at Corn School with Durham's approval. Budgeting salaries at 97.5% does not recognize the nexus between a new COVID mask policy and likely senior teachers' retirement. Try 96.5% instead. Increase in capital reserve from 1 to 2% should be done gradually over 4 years to avoid budget impact shock. That's from Chuck Stingle, that's on my comments, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone who spoke up. It's not always easy to stand up in front of a group and speak, and I appreciate you taking your time to speak out. Last item on the agenda is a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Oh, we need a motion to
So
adjourn. Moved by Lindsay,
Second.
seconded by Missy. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, meeting is adjourned.